Christine Nixon, thanks so much for joining us on the program this afternoon.
You're very welcome.
If you had your time over again, would you have acted any differently on Black Saturday?
I would, and I've said so, I think, on numerous times. I would have clearly stayed in the afternoon, and I think for many people it would have been an important statement that I was still there and was paying attention.
In your book you mention looking out of your office window in the docklands to sort of track the plumes of smoke from the fires. Do you think this was an appropriate way to judge the situation?
No, it wasn't, and I didn't say that. What I was doing in Docklands was looking at the change of the weather. At that stage, the change of weather was coming from Geelong way, and there were no plumes of fire in Geelong at that point, or at any stage actually. What I saw was just a weather change, a wind change, and I knew that that would be a significant issue. The real issue about the wind change was really where it was going to go, what kind of impact it was going to have, which made the fires actually very unpredictable.
They were unpredictable indeed. In fact, I was broadcasting that day from Yarra Glen, and we could see, I think, 3 and then 4 bushfires, but it was never very clear exactly where they were coming from or where they were going. Look, you've described the Victorian Bushfires Royal Commission as a kangaroo court. Now, you are a former Chief Commissioner of Police in this state, and as such, don't you think this description is perhaps a little inappropriate?
I think the exact words are that Royal Commissions can become a kangaroo court. And I think there's a separation from my comments about the bushfires. I've always had opinions about Royal Commissions, and I think I say so in there that they are always of concern to me, having had experience back till about 79 of having been first involved in the Lusher Royal Commission of the New South Wales Police. So I find it a really difficult mechanism to get to the answers, and I think that it can be misused, it can be abused in the process, no matter how much the commissioners might try and kind of manage the process. I think what happened in this case was that in some people's cases, as I've said, they've used it for their own purposes to have a go at me, I think, and I also think for a whole range of other reasons. So I guess I have a concern altogether about Royal Commissions.
What, do you think they're just politically motivated? I mean, there's an old saying that you should never start a Royal Commission unless you already know the answer in advance. Are you saying the Victorian Bushfires Royal Commission was one of those?
No, I think the Royal Commission was a response by the government to grave community concern about the terrible loss of the 173 people, and I think it was one of those things that was seen as a way to go forward. But I've had a great deal of time to both talk to the people in the bushfires areas and think about this, and maybe there were other models that we could have put into place that might have got to some of the problems that I think not just I, but I think a range of other people felt that were not able to be dealt with properly through that kind of mechanism.
In your book, you mentioned several people in the media: Neil Mitchell here at 3AW, John Fane at 774, various representatives in the Murdoch press. You accuse them of being out to get you. Now, why do you think these people had such an alleged vendetta against you?
I'm not sure I accuse all of them of being out to get me. I think there's a bit of a time issue here that we might want to look at. During the time I was the Chief Commissioner, I think I had cordial relationships with many people, including Neil Mitchell, who you've talked about in 3AW, and I think we could have very enthusiastic arguments, and but still went through a decent process. I think what happened though over time was that there were people within Victoria Police, and I think perhaps some who had been members of Victoria Police, others who might have been sort of part of it, who I think kind of leaked information and were able to kind of use that, I think, as a way of trying to undermine me.
Do police and associations with the police, for instance, the retired officers, that sort of thing, I mean, does information leaking, is that a reflection on the person leading the organisation?
So when I came into Victoria Police, they had a pretty sort of poor reputation, I think, of leaking a lot of information, and I always saw it personally that if I could have that change and that opened the mechanisms for people to complain and to do that, then I would have been on the track to success. And I remember actually some of the journalists talking to me and saying, well, we get less information these days around that sort of leaking, and I thought that was actually a pretty good thing. And I think even some of my conversations with Neil or some of the Herald Sun journalists had said the same thing. So I think what happened was over time, though, that as the changes that I was putting into place, I think with a broad range of support from the organisation started to bite. I think when some of the kind of machinations went on about who was in charge of the Police Association, I think some of those things then started to kind of leak out of the organisation into the media.
just going back to Neil Mitchell, in your book you say, while you might have had quibbles about Mitchell's portrayal of your policing and your exercise of it, throughout your years as Commissioner, you generally believed he dealt with you fairly and squarely. And then you make the comment, I would have cause to review this view later in the aftermath of the fires. So
That's right.
What do you think changed?
Well, I think Neil was just outraged by my behaviour on that night, and he said so, and he would have various other people came with him and in his, I guess the people who came into his radio program, and I think that he clearly, took on a view that this was the most disgraceful, outrageous thing anybody could have done, and said so. And I guess that's why I reviewed Neil's role.
The many critics of the book, or I wouldn't say many critics, but critics of your book have already said that it's simply an attempt to rewrite history. How would you respond to that? Look,
I think when anybody writes a memoir, it's something that we all get accused of because, in fact, it's from your own perspective. What I've tried to do is make it a legitimate kind of, by use of references and other kind of substantiation for the for the opinions that I've expressed. But, I mean, that's why history is always seen as, in different people's eyes. So I don't think what I'm trying to do, though, which I've also been sort of told, is I'm trying to make it as though I'm a victim or anything else, because I don't think that's the case either. What I want to say is that I think you can have a tough time like I've had, but I think you can cope. I think women can survive and you can achieve, and I think that's an important thing to say.
Well, speaking of having a tough time, I mean, since you've left the post of Chief Commissioner of Police here in Victoria, Simon Overland has done the same thing. I mean, is the job almost too much for one person?
I don't know. It's an interesting question, really. It's a very tough job and it's a very political job, and I think that hopefully after Simon's departure, the next person will get a kind of a fair run to start with, and I think that would be a very important thing for that person. I hope they come with legitimacy and support from the community, from the media, from the government, of course, and that they're able to get on and do the job. I think that people who put themselves up for these roles know that they're going to be high profile and they could be a problem, and I hope that whoever gets a job next can do it, and with a team around them will do a really good job.
And finally, some victim support groups have suggested that you donate some or all of the proceeds from the sale of your book, Fair Cop, to bushfire victims. Is this something you consider doing?
Look, I don't know how much people think you get from selling books these days. It's I'm not sure you get much money, but I've given a lot of my time, and I will continue to do that in the future as a volunteer with the bushfire communities. I work very closely with the bereaved community, and I've given money in different sorts of ways. I'd have to think about that statement from those people, but I'd more be talking to people who are very close to the bushfire communities, and they are the bereaved community, they are the community recovery groups that I've been working with over time, and I'm happy to talk with them about those sorts of arrangements.
Christine Nixon, we'll leave it there. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you very much for having me.